I feel it. I think a lot of good is going to come out of it.
Joining us right now is former White House Press Secretary, America First Action Senior Advisor and spokesperson Sean Spicer. Sean, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
You bet. Good morning.
A lot of conversation this morning in the op-eds post the Mueller testimony about not in my purview. A lot of things he refused to talk about. Kim Strassel out with a new op-ed in the Journal yesterday titled this, "What Mueller Was Trying to Hide." She writes, Mr. Mueller dodged and weaved and refused to avoid answering questions about the FBI's legwork, the dossier's role, and Fusion's involvement. The special counsel's often befuddled testimony has predictably raised questions about how in control he was of the 22-month investigation or the writing of the report. Mr. Mueller and his team are clearly playing their own important role in hiding the truth. The Mueller testimony only highlights how important it is that Attorney General William Barr is finally pursuing accountability. Sean Strassel writes that in this morning's Journal. And, you know, I've been asking the question for a couple of years now, can we even have any credibility of the special counsel if he doesn't focus and he doesn't look at the origins of the Russia investigation? Things like Fusion GPS, which, by the way, he said he's not familiar with.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are amazing questions. There were a bunch that were asked of him in terms of people that were involved in this investigation, or rather the origins of it, as you point out, that weren't mentioned at all in the report, and he gave no answer as to why they weren't mentioned, what their role could have been. But when you start to peel back this onion, has occurred, you start to hear about how a lot of this actually began in the first place in terms of Carter Page and George Papadopoulos. And how they were at first brought into this orbit and tracked, and who gave them what information and sucked them into this. And you really start to realize that this sounds really, really shady. When Mueller testified, the irony is this was supposed to be the Democrats' moment to bring the visual adaptation of the Mueller report to life. They called it a movie. They wanted the Americans who didn't read the report to finally see it in a different way. They thought this was going to be a big win for them. I think, to Kim's op-ed, this was a huge disappointment for the Democrats. She points out correctly, he looked flustered at times. He muddled through a lot of things. But also, and I think this was the key thing that got scant attention, and she points out as well, is that when he was asked, did you write the press release? Did you authorize the press release to go to the media? He couldn't answer that question. When she was asked, how much did you read of this report or write of this report? Again, he deferred on that. That really led people to believe if it's going to be called the Mueller report and Mueller didn't write it or understand its full contents, that's problematic.
Yeah, and, you know, the issue now is who did write it. So Andrew Weissman was, you know, his number two, and he was a Clinton friend, Clinton donor. He was at her party when she expected to win. Dagan?
But, Sean, isn't it time to just jettison the Mueller team and move on? Because, again, with President Trump in the White House, you have John Durham at the Justice Department, you have Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General for Justice, and also the likes of Lindsey Graham looking into all of this. We can get to the bottom of it. We can get answers to assure the American people that our surveillance laws will not be abused for political purposes. Andy McCarthy has said this.
If there's accountability, we can be sure. If there's no accountability, I don't think anybody's going to trust the FBI.
Right, but the accountability now is on the shoulders of Bill Barr and those within justice, thankfully.
Yeah, so look, the way I come down on this going into a re-election cycle is I think that the president's record of accomplishment, it should be the focus. What he has done, on whether it's veterans, the buildup of the military, the economy, his stances on foreign policy, his keeping the promises he made as a candidate. That being said, to your point, Dagan, if the Democrats are going to keep beating this dead horse over and over again, I think that we need to continue to point out the flaws in their argument, which, again, I go back to, if this was the best they got with this hearing, then it's not going to be that tough to do. We can't allow them to take these pot shots at the president or the team without countering with those things. So I would much rather have a conversation about policy and accomplishments. But if the Democrats are going to put all their eggs in this basket, which it looks like they are, they can't talk about accomplishments. They can't talk about an agenda. Look at what they've done with their majority. It's investigation after investigation after investigation that have been fruitless. But that's what they show the American people they want to do.
But that's even as the real crimes are not looked at. So that's the point. I mean, I don't think you can just gloss over the fact that for 3 years we have had the media with their heads on on fire talking about collusion between Trump and the Russians, and the media with their heads on fire talking about everything that he did when in fact he was set up. This is obviously clear now to everybody. And for the last 2 years, we've been talking about these questionable things that a cabal of people have done. Peter Strzok and Andrew McCabe. If we don't see accountability, and I'm talking prosecutions, then I don't know that anybody's going to feel like you can trust that you're not going to have the terrorism tools, things like informants, honeypots, wiretapping, all these things that were used on Donald Trump that are supposed to be used on terrorists.
Well, I think that one of the things that the president has said over and over again that people have to remember is that he's the president, right? He's got tremendous resources. He's wealthy. He can sort of defend himself. And you've seen the president is not shy about making his voice heard. But what happens when something like this happens to the average Joe that doesn't have the resources or the echo chamber that the president does? That's what I think should send a chill through everyone's back that's not the president of the United States or not rich and powerful, is that when the government has the opportunity to come after you.
Bothered me from the get-go, because it's not right that somebody could get wiretapped for no reason just because he was on the Trump campaign, so that they could get a window into his campaign so that one candidate can get an edge over another. And that's exactly what happened.
Wiretapped with opposition research from the opposing candidate that could have been Russia disinformation, which Bob Mueller and his team clearly didn't look at. I mean, I completely agree with your points. I do think, though, the American people are smart and they're waking up to the hoax. Yes, to use one of the president's words, because that's why you see his approval ratings going up, and they're finally focused on the economy and the strong numbers on economic approval.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the Democrats are in a tizzy fighting with one another. Look at this Nancy Pelosi versus the Squad story, Sean. The House Speaker set to meet with the Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in less than an hour, attempting to mend fences, apparently. Pelosi says she's looking forward to today's face-to-face. What do you think comes out of that meeting?
If that's what she's looking forward to, I'd hate to see the rest of her schedule, because that doesn't say much for her day. I think it's kind of, to be blunt, embarrassing that this freshman and these multiple freshman members of Congress are wagging the dog, if you will, proverbially, of the Democratic Party. You've got Nancy Pelosi that's been in Congress for more than 30 years. Regardless of my differences with her politically and policy-wise, she's a brilliant political tactician. And the idea that she's sitting here having to take her cues, and frankly, the entire party is taking their cues, and you have every presidential candidate answering to every tweet and utterance of a 29-year-old freshman. This is embarrassing for the Democratic Party. It's also very scary, the direction that they're going in. And the problem, I mean, here's the dirty secret. This is the end. They're about to go into a 42-day recess. So I think Pelosi's trying to make everything look real pretty before they head out of town.
No, that must
be it. But this is a challenge. The idea... I mean, this was so that she can make everything look nice, hopefully buy enough time so that they get out of town, and then she says, oh, we can't do impeachment because we're on break. But this is somewhat of a really, when people think about this, you've got this crazy left-wing, avid socialist, freshman member of Congress with no business experience sitting back dictating the terms in which the entire Democratic Party is taking their cues.
Pretty unbelievable. But as Nancy Pelosi said, it's just 4 votes. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
Sean, it's good to see you. Thanks so much.
You bet, guys. Thank you.
Sean Spicer there.